like you do, I'm going to start from my QBOA and actually just go into a client file. And we can circle back in QBOA later. I think Denise said that you guys are pretty all aligned on QuickBooks Online Accountant. But the feature gaps that you're still going to see I'll focus on, some inventory updates, bank feed updates, some of the QBO automation that's not in desktop, and then we'll look at reporting. We'll look at those 4, and then there's a document attached that we recently enhanced. So some things that came into QBO in the last month, because we actually enhanced the product about once a month, once every couple months of features. And the goal for Intuit from a development standpoint is really to have parity with reporting, and then for product-based businesses. And then down the line, we'll work on kind of job costing stuff. But so there are still some gaps, obviously, with inventory and job costing. You're still, where you're going to need a third-party app just to start is if you need build assemblies, unit of measure, sales order workflow, price levels, progress invoicing or progress billing, as you might call it, as well as partial receiving against like a purchase order. On the inventory kind of sales order side, distribution type client, that's still where Premier and Enterprise. Now, a lot of those aren't even in QuickBooks Pro, right? So Pro doesn't have sales orders or unit of measure either. But that kind of stuff is not going to be yet in QuickBooks Online. Even in the Plus level, you would leverage a third-party app like SOS Inventory, and there's several of them, Stitch Labs, Dear Inventory. So there's a lot of on apps.com. But we're going to keep looking at that, and we recently added group items to QuickBooks Online. So I'm going to show you that. We'll look at inventory by bundles, as well as making a quantity adjustment and a starting value adjustment, which is kind of like a value adjustment in desktop. The job costing stuff is the other big kind of gap in my mind between desktop and QBO, where even Pro, when you create an estimate, you automatically have an estimate to actual report. I mean, you don't have any amounts in the actual yet, but you would have an estimate to actual. So though there's workarounds in QBO, the light job costing really in QBO Plus is to pass time, expense, material through to an invoice, or you just want like a profitability by sub-customer, aka job, you would need Plus for that. And though there are workarounds with using the budget to actual reporting, using budgets per customer, that's still something that we're going to need to build in, though there's plenty of third-party apps. So first off, just with navigation, if you guys are using, you have open windows. And I don't know, Denise, you guys are already aware of, like, using multiple tabs and things like that, or is anybody at a location that wouldn't know they could have multiple windows up using the tabs? Just want to know.
Yeah, it would be good to show them. I know some know where it is, but it's probably one of those things that some may not. So yeah.
Cool. And then I'll start with that and touch on the Windows app a little bit in QB Labs, and then we'll dive into the inventory updates, bank feeds, the automation and reporting, and that'll probably take us for the hour. And we can always, do this again whenever you guys want. Just let me know. Happy to jump on an hour or 45 minutes, whatever, or longer. So I'm on this P&L. I want to have another one up. Now, you guys might still be using the classic reporting. This is redesigned reports where I can actually, customize right on the report itself. It's a little clearer and bolder font, prettier. You can add endnotes to the last page. Soon it'll be on every page for like quote unquote SARS 21. But adding notes now just puts the endnote on the last page of the report. And then you can customize here. You might have the classic view, and I'll show you in QB Labs where to go to turn redesigned reports on. You have to do it per file that you're in. If you prefer that over the classic reporting. Right now you can use either or, the old reports versus the new. But if I wanted another report open, or I wanted to drill down on this sales or product income account, and I don't want to lose the summary report, a couple ways to do it. I'm using Google Chrome. I'll show it to you with the Windows app, but Google Chrome is, we kind of optimized QBO for, but you could do it in Firefox. There's either the toolbox. When you're in through QBOA, don't forget about this little toolbox here. I mean, this is where we have that batch or classify CDR feature that's been in Account Edition forever. We brought it over here. The working trial balance, to quickly get the journal entries or the closed books. And this report tools itself, I like to come in here and set the default date range for any report when I'm in a client, or basis. If they're cash basis, I might want to run these reports on a cash basis, and I want every report to open up on cash basis without me having to customize it on the fly, or the date range. I think we default to the last month. So you can set it to last quarter or this fiscal year or whatever, and every report and tool open to this. So keep in mind this little toolbox for you guys, and go to Report Tools, which is actually the old QBOA homepage for those who've been doing this for a while, and set your default date range. So now when I go to an actual report and I've P&L up, let's say I want to either drill down or have a balance sheet too, I can either right-click, duplicate the tab, or I can go to, if you're in Firefox or something, you can go to Gear Icon New Window, which is going to create another tab for me, another profit and loss. And now I can go to, instead, the balance sheet. And now I have, two reports open. Or maybe before I drill down on the total cost of goods sold or this shrinkage, which looks really off to me, before I drill down and don't want to lose the summary, I can right-click, duplicate the tab, which will make another P&L, and then I drill down. And though it's named as the company file, oh, by the way, you can do this with transactions. So I go to the journal entry, right-click, open a new tab. So now I have 3 separate tabs open in the same file, right? So this journal entry, let's pretend I just did one. By the way, this is the recent transaction, recent history of journal entries. That little clock in the upper left, use that. It's a cool feature. This journal entry is open. I have this report open, and then I have this report open. And I can take, the tabs and move them to another monitor. So it's kind of like our attempt at bridging the gap with open window list, which, again, it's not a true open window list. You're not going to see that. And, by the way, the transactions are not linked to the reports, meaning that if I enter a check in one tab, it's the P&L that check is hitting, and the balance sheet are not going to reflect that check until I hit the refresh. So you have to know that. Like I qualify, tabbed browsing is this trick we call where you can just right-click, duplicate, and it's very helpful to have open windows open in QBO as you're used to desktop. But just remember, when you're done entering all that transaction data that would affect the report open in another tab, you want to force the refresh by hitting F5 or clicking the refresh key. And you can do it with other tabs as well. Duplicate. Some people like to have, the bank credit card window open, and then they'll duplicate it, and then they'll have the actual register for that Amex open as well. And they'll put, the Amex register on one window. And, you guys do this way more than I do, so you know what I'm talking about. So that is what, view register, and now I have the Visa and the bank credit card fee. So you can do this all day long. Just remember that the windows are not auto-refreshed. They're not linked in that way. In order to do that, just real quick, and I don't know how many, and your clients can do this as well, I'll make sure you get my website, or you can just go to look at apps.com or quickbooks.into.com/apps. You can download the QBO app for Windows. It's free. You already have a login. You're part of one of the Elliott Davis firm QBOA locations. So because you have you're a team member, that means you have a QBO login. Or your client can do this. They can go and download the app. And it literally is an app that installs locally. I don't know if any of you across the firm are using it. But if you're a long-time desktop user, it's very helpful. It'll look like, your Enterprise or your Premier, the icon will, but it just says QuickBooks. And when you open it up, now I'm in QBOA, and I can go into a different client file. But I'm using an app that's installed on my machine. It's a very small utility. The data is still on Intuit servers. But I want to show you a couple of the navigation things that you might like. Let me look in the chat. I guess someone's chatting with me now just to ask questions. Oh, cool. That's Denise. All right, cool. So I'm in Katie's company, right? I'm in through QBOA. I have my toolbox and everything like that. I have the left-hand panel, the plus sign, and the gear icon, just like anything else. I have the same home page as if I was in through Google Chrome or Firefox. However, I can shrink this left-hand panel down to get more real estate, and I can use the actual drop-down menus. So under Create, and we have like 100 keyboard shortcuts if you're really used to that with desktop, though they're not the same keyboard shortcuts. Like a check isn't Control-W, it's Control-K, etc. But these features, whether they're a list, a report, or a transaction, can open up in a separate window. So I could have that. I could have the journal entry. All the transactions are under the Create menu. So net, there's a drop-down menu in QBO. And, this would be my gear icon. right? And then I could open the chart of accounts from here, navigate to the left-hand panel. I can start opening reports up into their own window. So I have a P&L open in one window. I have a balance sheet open in the other, or any other report I really need. And the reports are linked to each other, and you can go down to your system tray or use Alt-Tab. So like there's a report. Now I'm looking at the journal entry window. You can put them on another monitor. It's just a lot more freedom and flexibility, and we tried to create an app that would have a similar open window, though there's no view open window list. There's the open windows that you'd be at least familiar to those that are working most of the day on desktop, and then you just have to go into QBO a couple times. Then, as you're getting used to QuickBooks Online and where everything is, having a drop-down menu might be a lot easier. So know that there's the app there. You can download it and install it. The other thing I do like about the app is if you want to stay signed in. So I'll show you that. I'll sign out. But if I exit QuickBooks, it'll bring me back to QBOA every time. I don't have to enter my user ID and password. But just to sign out, I'll show you the initial screen where you can put in your email and your password. And that's what it would look like. When you click on the QuickBooks icon, I'm just going to sign in. I'm going to click on the Elliott Davis QBOA location I'm a part of as a team member, and I'm going to see all the clients in my dashboard that, Denise gave me access to work on. But the app is literally installed on my machine. Yeah. So any questions around the Windows app or or tab browsing, what we've seen so far?
It's so much nicer.
Okay, cool. Hopefully those things help as well. Again, some of you are going to be a different different experience with QuickBooks Online. I often use a top icon bar like you can create in desktop, and that's another trick. Using Chrome, you can create you can do this for your clients as well. So if I click chart of accounts, no matter what file I'm in, it's going to bring me to my list of accounts I can go into the register. And you can do that for your clients because they might not know where reconcile is. I mean, maybe you don't want them to do a reconcile, but you know what I mean? Like, they might not know where reconcile is or budget or things like that. So you can actually create a top icon bar for them so that they're just one click away from the key pages they go to. And so if they go to receive payments all the time, which, I mean, I think anybody can figure out where stuff is, right under the customer and you receive payment, but you could just favorite the page you're on and add it to the bookmarks bar. Now, no matter whatever client file I'm in, I click receive payment, it's going to bring me there. So it's like customizing the top icon bar for your clients that you'll do in desktop, and yet I know a lot of accountants do this too because you're just one click away. So I wanted to line in some of the navigation tips to kind of bridge the gap with desktop workflow. You have the Windows app, you have tab browsing to get your open windows, and you have the top icon bar. But yes, you can have multiple reports open, even on the browser. Okay, you can have transactions and reports open at the same time. You don't have to use the back button. You shouldn't really be using the back button. All right, you shouldn't be using that at all. Okay, other thing, let's look at QB Labs to show where to turn some stuff on that I have that you might not. If you looked at my left-hand panel, my customers and sales and vendor and expenses are consolidated into one tab. So I have the customer list here, and then I have the transaction list here, where I can also create transactions under here. Yours just might say customers, vendors, and then you have this transaction, and then banking, chart of accounts, sales, and expenses buried under it. So I just find this one way more intuitive, and the redesigned reports. And there's other things. If you go to the gear icon in your QBO next time, go to QuickBooks Labs, which you'll find at the bottom of the Your Company menu. And here's where I can turn on the alternate navigation with centers. That consolidates customers and sales transactions into one tab, vendors and expense transactions into one tab. Let me close my instant message there. All right. As well as bank feeds is its own menu item on the left, and chart of accounts, so the registers. I just find it's way easier when you're navigating to have this type of alternate navigation with centers turned on. I would also turn on redesigned reports if you want to start playing with these, because these are eventually going to be the reporting UI in QBO, right? So if you're using classic reports, you might as well turn these on now. A couple other things to show is the collapse left navigation panel. That just gets you more real estate. It puts a little arrow on the left so you can close that panel, particularly when the Windows app, and have more room for reporting or what you have just in the actual QBO main window. And then this is similar to what we have in desktop when you're creating a company file for another one. You can actually create these company templates and use them in new QBO subscriptions if you turn that on. By industry type, it'll bring in, a specific chart of account, products and service list, and preferences turned on. So that's another good one to have turned on. So that's QB Labs. It'll be under the gear icon, and it's why I have my reports as they are, as well as my left-hand panel as they are. Now, if there's no questions with that, I'm going to jump into inventory updates for your product-based businesses. So let's go to account and settings, just so we're aligned there. Because we've changed the gear icon names a little bit when you're in through QBOA. It should match what your client sees. So instead of company settings, or settings, it's now account and settings under the gear icon. It's still there. And now we have, these are the same, except the your account or the billing and subscription is here. So we've changed that a little. However, if you go into sales, products, and services, here is where you will turn quantity on hand on. This is not new. QBO Plus has had a first in, first out inventory for a while. Some of your clients are probably already using it. We did add the ability, though, for a SKU column, which I'll show you when we go on to the products and service. And the SKU column can be in sales forms as well. Now, that might be helpful as a quote-unquote custom field, because in QuickBooks Online, we don't have any custom fields at the item or name level yet. There's 3 custom fields, and they're on the sales transactions: estimate, sales receipt, and invoice. There's no other custom fields really. And it's not like you can set a default and it'll automatically populate like in desktop. So no doubt, I'm sure we're working on that, but use some of these other stuff we're adding, like SKU column might be something that someone could use for a color or a type or material or whatever that an item might have, and then you can filter reports by it. So we added SKU, I'll show you, but really it's about the quantity on hand. You're turning it on. A few other things to note. For purchase orders, you can now, and by the way, Pro doesn't even have this. This is a Premier and Enterprise feature. Copy estimates to purchase order. So for your contractors, the reason why they choose Premier Contractor, one of them, over QuickBooks Pro is because when they're doing estimates and they have like 20 or 15 non-inventory parts they're using on the job, they go create a purchase order to replenish their stock. It's not really inventory they're using. It's just a non-inventory part. But they don't have to create the PO from scratch and add all those items. They go from the estimate to the PO. And that's just one of the cool benefits for contractors that Premier offers in Enterprise versus Desktop Pro. QBO now has that. You can go estimate to a purchase order. And you also want to have estimates to invoices turned on, though there's no progress invoicing turned on at this time. Okay, so we have that because that'll come into play later. Under the gear icon, list products and services. So this is a pet store, but it's also like a boarding kennel kind of thing. So I have, and we also sell guitars. Sorry, I guess in the mixed bag. Maybe I should have a different file for that one. That must have been for a different demo, a different firm. But anyways, you have dog treats, right? I got dog attire I sell. I have boarding and grooming. And by the way, I have these set up in categories. Recently, we've created categories to assign items to. So you can create these categories. I think this is equating what desktop would do with parent items and sub-items. Sub-items are really, we call them categories in QuickBooks Online. So you'll see this in Essentials and Plus. And I can create a category. It's pretty easy. I mean, like pet furniture, for example, you just name it, and you can have subcategories. Once you create the category, when I go back to products and service, I can look at my list by category. I can also filter because my list is like 30 items, but your clients might have 200, 2,000, 5,000 items because there's no real list cap for the most part with QBO. So I can filter by a category and just look at, all the items that are in the boarding category, and I can just look at that. So this would be helpful for filtering the list when the list is really long. You manage categories, and when you create an item, you can assign it to a category because I can filter reports by category. I can choose items on sales transactions by category. I can do a search for it, by, quick typing. So there's that. So when you create a new item, you now, instead of just product and service, even though that's the name of the general list, and some of you might already know this because you keep up on our updates, but we have now segregated the items into different subtypes, if you will: inventory, non-inventory, and service. And yes, QBO Plus can have two-sided items, or you might call it double-sided items. That's not new. I mean, that's just, that gap has never been a problem. You can do two-sided items. I can pass time, expense, and material through to an invoice in QBO Plus, and that's always been there. But we did recently, several months ago, might even be 6 or more, instead of just a product and a service, I can just choose inventory or non-inventory or service item. And you might have reasons to use this versus that. I know in desktop it's nice to have those different types of items. But the bundle is new. And a bundle really is a group item, right, in desktop. And even Pro has group items. So this is where, back to Denise's point or Amanda's theme when we were talking in the beginning as everybody was joining, is we're really trying to, for product-based businesses, trying to align QBO Plus with what Pro has. The only thing really now that bundles are in here that QBO is missing for product-based businesses would be price levels and the progress invoicing. So you have those two things that were, that obviously are probably out there on the roadmap. I'm guessing. I just can't share a lot about that. But anyway, for product-based businesses, those are important. But the group item was a big one, and that's the one that you'll see in your client's QBO files. Bundles, we call them. It's akin to a group item in desktop, and your contractor clients are using them because of this deal here. Do you not want to display the bundle components when you're sending or printing a transaction to the customer, right? You might not want to. I might just want to see like my groom and board item and not all the component parts because I don't want to seem like I'm nickel and diming the customers. So that's a huge benefit for really a lot of industries, but contractors specifically, I know because we're having a leak in our house here. So if, Nickel and I hired a contractor and they're using QBO, they would have all the component parts. And by the way, it's not an accounting move, right? This is just an item. Just the pricing is going to be based on, actually, I think I have one already set up. Let's look at that one. It's called Groom and Board. Yeah, so it's a bundle item. The actual pricing, the sales price and the cost is based on the component parts. Second here as that comes up. Well, maybe I will create one real quick. So I'll do bundle. And then, so I'm not going to display the component parts, and I'll just choose, maybe I'm going to throw in the Great Dane suit, and then one of those, as well as maybe a dog leash, and then we'll do some milk bones. I know I have those. And we'll say, we'll give them like a box. And then anything else that you really wanted to include. Now, and I can call it, starter pet kit or something, whatever you want to call it. Put a SKU, if you like, whatever you call it, like there. And again, you can use this for something else. It's going to be called SKU, but what's nice is that you could use this for some other field to filter on reports. Put in the sales information, and then you can even add a picture, because I can add pictures to items in QBO, and that's been available for well over a year. Okay. Now, notice you're not seeing a cost or a sales rate here because it's going to pull those from the component parts, just like a group item would in desktop, right? This is not a build assembly. This is not a finished good. This is just a bundle that I'm going to put together for like a kit or a championship package or like a flower bouquet, or you guys consider many different things. It's really, to me, when on a sales transaction, I only want my customer to see what it is without all the component parts that I'm pulling from. And again, if I do want them to see it, I would check it, but typically you're going to just not show the component parts. When I click Save and Close, now I have that particular bundle there. Oh, and then here's my groom and boarding one, right? And I have a picture of the dog sleeping and stuff like that. So now that I have that, when I go to a sales transaction, just so you guys can see, we'll do a sales receipt. And we'll look at inventory too and the quantity on hand as well, because there's been a lot of enhancements to inventory that do bridge the gap there. So let's say Emily came in and she's bringing in, the dog or whatever, and she's going to, I pretend I have QB payments turned on, so I'd enter the credit card detail right there. So, and I'm just going to start typing, and I could start typing by the SKU or the name or whatever, and it would pull it in. But there's my groom and board, and I have a little detail there. Though I can see the components on the screen, and I'm actually going to make this is actually 3 nights. Though I can see it on the screen, all she's going to see is groom and board, the description I want, right? Customer won't see any of the items in the bundle. She won't even see that sentence, right? And then the rate. And now she'll see that in the 187.88. Yet in the back end, when you guys are looking at, the transaction journal behind the sales receipt itself, this will show us that, the appropriate debit and crediting of the accounts. This is your Control Y report. You guys probably have. But notice it's not really about the group item at all. It's about the component parts part of the bundle. Okay? Let's go back to that sales receipt. So, by the way, when you click on the search field in the upper right, it gives you the last 10 transactions entered. It's just a quick way to get back there. It's like the previous button on transactions at desktop, but it actually works. Because the previous button is always out of order in my QuickBooks Desktop. All right, so when I print it out, though, we'll just see a preview. We're just going to see, the total amount and what it is. So I'm sure you're already thinking of scenarios where this would work. A lot of people use this for commissions and royalties, and you have different items hitting like a liability account and things like that. So there's plenty of reasons in group items in desktop that you use as workarounds for stuff that desktop just doesn't track natively. And so this is why group items are so important. So we added it. We just call it bundles. It's just called a bundle in QBO. And you'll find that in Essentials and Plus. And you can almost include any kind of component item. And there's no real limit to how many components you can have. Now, inventory is going to be typical. Notice that I can make a quantity and a starting value adjustment. I will explain those in a second because these are recently new, and you might not know. You might not be using inventory in QBO because you might not think that QBO even handles inventory. It is a first in, first out valuation method. When you convert from desktop and you have inventory in the desktop file you're converting, there'll be a pop-up during conversion. Some of you might have seen it to remind you that it's going to move it to FIFO. Even though there's an average cost column on the valuation detail report, you'll have a FIFO date that you can choose. And I know typically for taxes on calendar years, so you're probably doing January 1st is when you'd start it, but you can decide when you want QBO to track first in, first out, and it's going to make a journal entry adjustment during the conversion affecting inventory, asset, and COGS because FIFO and average cost are very different. But you do have inventory parts. I'm going to edit my guitar here. It's 12 string. Again, it's a 3-sided item. None of that's new. This has been in here for a very long time, long time. But I want to hit inventory asset. I want to hit it revenue. I want to hit COGS. When you sell an inventory part, like in desktop, it's going to debit COGS, right? You're going to debit COGS at that point. However, you used to have to edit the quantity on the item record. And a lot of times, and you couldn't do it for like a week ago before you started selling, right? And your valuation's off. So we really needed a true adjust quantity on hand feature in QBO instead of just going to the item that you could backdate it. Or maybe someone added an item. It didn't come over from desktop, so it would have like the original starting value, but they added the wrong cost of the inventory part. There was no way to go back and adjust that starting value, in an easy way. You would have to enter a bill or something with the cost before you brought it in. There's always workarounds like in desktop, and you guys probably have even another way you could do it that I haven't thought of. But now we actually have a quantity adjustment and a starting value adjustment window. So let's start with the value one. And this is not meant to be an ongoing periodic value adjustment window like you have in desktop. It's really because when I put in the initial cost, to me, it wasn't $1,500. Actually, for me, it's $1,750. And you can choose the adjustment account. Obviously, you're all cringing because nobody wants to hit opening balance equity, right? So you would choose your appropriate cost of goods sold account that this adjustment would offset. Because when you're doing a value adjustment in desktop, that's what you're doing. You're offsetting it probably to COGS or something like that. So this is actually going to impact my COGS as well as inventory asset account, right? And I can change the initial quantity that I had at the time and not offset the opening balance equity, which was another kind of loophole and a possible problem is if they edited the quantity on the item and they put an initial quantity and it hits OBE, and no one wants to hit opening balance equity really in real life. You just don't want to do that. So that's one of the reasons why you're seeing something in OBE when it should always be 0. So I can make a starting value adjustment. I can do it from there, or I can do it from the inventory valuation summary report for all dates. You'll see an option to change a starting value. Super helpful when people our clients come to you and they're a product-based business and they did the initial cost wrong to start for a lot of their items. Now you can make a value adjustment. It's not meant to be a periodic one. It's just really for the initial value. Okay? But you can also do a quantity adjustment, and I love the fact that this is now its own transaction. I mean, even when I went into quantity in the item and edited it before, it would still show up on a valuation report or a quick report as a quote-unquote inventory adjustment, but it wasn't its own transaction form, right? So I have this, let's say I have 3 on hand, and then the new quantity is actually 2, so I am offsetting it to shrinkage or whatever you want. I mean, again, you guys are going to have really proper names of accounts. That's really not my skill set. I just, I learned from people like Denise and Pro Advisors, so. But I'm not in it every day, so you might offset it to some other account. Still, you can the adjustment can be its own transaction, and you can run a quick report on these things. Just run report, and that's not new, but just so you can see that I adjusted the value, I adjusted the quantity. Here's an invoice expense. Where is this item hanging out on throughout QBO? Over the last date range. So I love doing the quick reports. I love clicking the More tab on transactions and doing a transaction journal. That is your control Y. And hopefully you guys are doing that too, just to make sure the accounting is lining up. Because all these transactions are basically just journal entries behind the scenes, okay? Okay, double entry. All right, so those are the big ones. Categories, bundles, value adjustment. Remember, that's a starting initial cost value adjustment, not really meant to be an ongoing, value adjustment. And then you have the quantity adjustment. Any questions with that in respect to inventory? I don't know if you guys have a lot of clients with inventory, but QBO Plus has that, and we have several inventory-related reports, right? And then, of course, the valuation detail would show quantity and value adjustments as well.
Woody?
Yes, hi.
Woody? This is Denise. I have one question, and I'll kind of pose it this way. We had, in QBO, if you change the price of an item, is it going to go retroactive yet like it used to? Do you remember that?
Oh, if you get the pop-up? Let me see. So if I edit this item, and you're saying that the sales price, you don't mean on a form like right here, if I was going to change this, and it's actually going to be 3K? Right. Mm-hmm. And I think when I save it, there's no pop-up that says it's retroactive with a line in the sand. I think the pop-up, because I know desktop has that and enterprise has it as well, where you get, do you want this to affect transactions?
What we had, and this, I haven't tested it out in QBO recently, but we had a client where they would change the price of something like a nail, and they would sell, thousands of them. And so what it did is it went back and changed their financials because they didn't want it to go back and change, but it did. It changed it. It went retroactive since inception of that item. So they were having to set up a new item every time. But I didn't know if you ran across that again. And that may be something that doesn't even exist anymore in there,
Okay. No, because no, that shouldn't. I'd have to look at that because changing that should only affect it going forward. If I do all dates, I'm just trying to think how I'd really troubleshoot that one. I know I changed the starting value, so this. No, that's just the value. No, I don't. So I didn't see a pop-up, but I also didn't see a checkbox not to impact. So I'll have to find out for you if it does retroactively change everything. Because, well, wait, if I go back to an invoice that was before today.
Yeah, see what that is.
The rate was $2,500, so it's not 3. So it didn't change it.
Okay, perfect.
I don't know what happened there. Now, I know that when you change the account, I think you get the pop-up if I was to change, like not the asset, but maybe the revenue account to something like sales, and I click save and close, I thought I would, no, I guess not. And that should be retroactive. So I remember when you would change an account in an item, it would say, do you want it to impact transactions, history, and you could say yes or no. I don't even see that in QBO.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Woody.
No, thanks for pointing that out. All right. So look for more stuff with products and services. Remember, if you are doing some light job costing, and though we're not really showing this today, there are some key settings. They're not new, but I just want to take the advantage that we're just take an opportunity here to be aligned here together. If you want to show in Plus, you have the ability to have the items tab on expense forms, right? Essentials and Simple Start won't have this. It'll just show account details, and you can hit accounts. You can't put items on a check or a bill or a credit card expense, or even say time. You'll find that in the advanced setting. If you want the items table on your cost forms and to be able to track the expense on items by customer, in other words, put a customer field to tag that particular quote unquote item to the customer, which will, so you could like do profitability by customer on your P&L, or make it billable, you got to check off those boxes. And here's where you'd add for time tracking to make it billable, and add a service field to invoices on timesheets. And just to quickly show, and you might already know, but when you're doing an expense, and we'll say it's like a credit card expense, there's no banking and or credit card charges, right? This is me doing the credit card charge in QBO. Let's say I'm, this subcontractor. I can use the items here, right, in Plus, because you might have an estimate that's all item-based, or you might have, a sales receipt that's showing all the revenue item-based, and you want to have the expenses at the item-based level as well. So these are two-sided items, and I could choose an item, but I could also make it billable and tag a customer. So that's at the Plus level, so you can do kind of light job costing, but there's no real default canned out-of-the-box estimate to actual report. There's a workaround out there, but it requires just a lot of, that you have to have hands on it all the time. And it's, again, for contractors, I just suggest a third-party app now. My personal favorite is Notify, but there's CoreCon, there's many of them. But for real people that need to track labor burden, cost to the business of employees before you run payroll, cost of purchase orders, before they're on a bill or a check to the business, all that stuff, progress billing, change orders, that's where these third-party apps are going to kind of carry that weight for us. And then QBO is just doing like a P&L by customer. That's a new report, by the way. If you have redesign reports turned on, go to Business Overview. You got P&L by customer now, right? Before you had to filter the report. So we added a balance sheet detail report recently and open invoices, but it's very similar to custom balance detail anyway. All right. Bank feed updates. I'm going to go into a different file. You guys might have met Valerie already, and she does a lot with bank feeds. She has a great file with bank feeds. So one of my peers here, she's based in Chicago, but I'm using her file right now. Hopefully you're doing a lot with bank feeds, right? Because we're going to match things so they're not duplicated. Rules are going to be applied to auto-categorize and auto-choose the appropriate vendor, right? You're gonna, as you have your client and you set up the bank feed with a credit card or checking account, you're going to see the predictable expenses. You're going to start creating rules on things so that you just don't have to do the accounting. But the newest thing we added is this. You see this icon? And I'll show you. It's particularly, I do a monthly insurance, right? It comes in from City of Bayshore every month. And I don't have to review it. These are for those predictable expenses that, yes, I'd like to have the rule apply for these conditions, that the description would contain nationwide, or not just the description, but I can add a line for bank text that it's going to contain nationwide. So any of these criteria are met, it's going to, and you guys probably already know about bank feeds, you're already using with your clients, but it's going to create an expense type transaction to this payee for this insurance, or split it out by percent or whatever. And you can even do splits by class, which is nice. But this automatically add to my books, that's new. Okay? So what's that literally going to do? When the rule is applied, it's going to automatically add it into the register. these would be for the ones, and I'm going to go to that expense right now. By the way, and this isn't new stuff, I just want to make sure we're aware of this. In desktop, when you do an online banking and your client makes a mistake, there's no way to batch undo. You got to go into the register and get those out of there, deleting and re-download the statement. I just think that's just a lot of time and riddled with obstacles. So though we don't want mistakes to happen, when they do, I can literally take all these that were just the wrong rules applied, or they didn't do it the right account, and I can just undo them. So they go back in the for review tab, and now I can do them correctly. So I love the fact of the batch undo and the batch add or batch match, but the rules themselves, when you have it set, I'm going to go to the expense. Remember, anything blue, it's going to take you to where you're going to go. This has the online banking matches and the mode automatically added with rule. So you'd be able to see the breadcrumbs. You'd be able to see at the transaction level, well, how did this one get in there? Did they just, did they enter it or what? No, it was done through online banking, and it was automatically added with a rule. Now, this isn't going to be the payee, right? I mean, the payee is City of Bayshore, but this is what the bank detail came in. And you can actually have that added to even to the memo field. And that's not new, but I just like the fact, you guys might want to see that bank detail because sometimes it doesn't really match how you want it. And you can unmatch it, which will take it out of the register. It'll unmatch it from that transaction in the register and put it back in the for review tab. I just like the bank feeds. There's a lot of fail safes I find for accountants, the batch undo. But remember that box. You're probably not going to want to check on everything, clearly. But for that particular expense that doesn't require any real review or second thought, check off the box to auto add to register. And it's literally, once the rule is applied, it's going to add it to the register so you don't even have to, check these off and batch actions except selected. And know that you can delete stuff out too. If stuff's a mistake, you can delete it and exclude it and then go into the excluded tab and delete it out of QBO. Everything in the for review is in limbo anyway. It's just waiting to go to the register. And by the way, which on the client dashboard at QBOA, I would see a 6, in the banking status column on the dashboard in QBOA. I'm not really worried about this client. I'm more worried about the one that has 95 or 300 transactions that haven't been accepted in the register yet. So that's a client I'm probably working on or concerned about, not the one that has 6. But just know you can have QBO auto add stuff to the register because really we feel like in the accounting industry, a lot of reports and documents out there written about the next big trend outside of apps, but apps are going to help with this, is the automation of the data entry. Over the next 18 months, 2 years, you're going to see that that's just that's going to be more the norm. So we're already doing it with our bank feeds, but there's a lot of apps that do it as well. Okay, any questions around bank feeds or the auto rule? Again, your client, probably not checking the box off on everything, but there will be some stuff where it's relevant. All right, automation. You guys might already know this, and then we'll look at reporting too, and then doc attach. I think we can get to those things. One conversion update I'd like to do, and we got another 13 minutes, so we're doing real well. For reports, right? You have your memorized report list. We call it My Custom Reports. Though not new, we have updated. And this, I guess, bridges the gap with memorized reports, but this isn't new. I mean, you've been able to create a group for a while. When you save a customizations of a report, you can add it to a group, and then I can actually schedule the group. And not that maybe you can't do this in South Carolina or Georgia or the other locations for Elliott Davis, but I could set up, this schedule to go, monthly to whoever's on the email chain, and choose the interval and if there's an end date or something like that, or weekly even maybe is better. I know a lot of people that send if you have recurring transactions turned on, or there's a preference to automatically create an invoice for unbilled activity for customers. I mean, that's some of the automation that QBO has that desktop doesn't, and I can show you where those are. And you can auto send recurring transactions just like reports. But I know I have friends who will set up a group of reports, and one will include the recently entered transaction report. which is like the automated transaction report. You just send that of what went to the CEO of the business or your client or whatever every Friday. And you put in their email. Now, it's not encrypted. It's going to show up in the body of the email, but it would give him the information without having to go into QBO, because maybe you don't want that person in QBO for various reasons. So I can set a sending auto send schedule. I can do that with transactions as well. The only thing new with the reports is that we've made it look like the rest of QBO. The automating of the report sending out of QBO was like always looked like old QBO, the classic QBO. So we've made it look like, quote unquote, the newer Harmony version that's really been the version for the last 3 years anyway. Recurring transactions, those are memorized transactions. So I can also set these to, let's see if I have an invoice here. It's unscheduled now. Let me click at it. But I could have it automatically sent. That's not new, but just so you know, differences from desktop to QBO. QBO has a lot of automation differences around reporting, bank feeds, and recurring transactions. And I can also include any charges, whether I'm using the delayed charge form, which is like a non-posting customer transaction. You might have seen that in Essentials or Plus, to be invoiced later, or any time I might have tagged time, material, or expense to a customer in Plus. This recurring invoice will also, with this box checked, include anything for that. What's my interval here? Let's see my interval. Oh, let me schedule it first. Let's say I send them an email monthly, on the last day of the month. I'll say 30th, last day. So February be 28th or 29th. Choose when to start, and then you have a no end date. When this monthly email gets sent from Intuit servers to the customer on this email, it's going to include any stuff that I haven't invoiced this customer yet. It's going to include it on this invoice. And again, this is a know your customer deal, because that might be way too much automation. And you guys would know this, and you'd say, look, we're not going to check that off for you because you want to control what's going on the invoice. That's fine. From the drawer that opens up on the right-hand side, when you're creating the invoice and you have all these expenses and delayed charges and things you want to add or estimates. So they might want to control this. If you check the box, it's just going to include it. So you might have customers that do. It's very simple workflow, and they just don't want to forget anything. It's a great checkbox. That's not new. I'm just showing you where desktop, you have to choose what's going on the invoice. There's no way to automatically send an invoice out of desktop and include unbilled activity. Okay? So that's I like that. That kind of automation I think QBO owns. You guys are mostly pro advisors, so I can share this with you. For 2017 desktop, you probably haven't installed yet, but it's gone out to us, all of pro advisors. So we're okay sharing it with you. I'm not going to be in trouble or anything. But one of the new features, really the only new real main feature in desktop, is the ability to schedule reports to auto send. So it's interesting because actually desktop is pulling a feature from QBO and not usually the story is the other way around, right? Okay, let's check out the chat message as well. Anything here? Report groups, yes. With other users, yeah, let's do that. And then, so those are basically the automated things. I mean, there's another thing here. If you have your clients, if they're doing a lot of sending invoices and they want their clients, their customers to pay online using a credit card or a bank and routing number, turn payments on. It's pretty affordable for most businesses, I would say. And it allows them to just greatly reduce their AR, because as soon as the customer gets the invoice, there'll be a pay now button and they can put in a credit card or ACH, and you can control how they pay you anyway. The ACH, by the way, is now free. There's no transaction fee for that, which is kind of nice. So when you turn the online payment on and you set this up as a recurring sales receipt or invoice, then it's just more automated on the sales side. So I like that. That's not really new. Just I was just there and I saw it. Okay, let's go back to report groups. I'm going to customize one. I think it's the best way to show it. And we'll just go to, let me just do a quick report here. Again, these are the new designed reports. I'm kind of killing two birds over here. And let's say I just want to do prior period, and then, well, actually I'm doing this year to date, so prior year really, and then a year to date, and I could do percent change. So similar columns you could do in desktop, but on the fly I'm just kind of changing that on the fly, and if I want to customize further, I can click customize. But let's run the report, and let's say, okay, this report looks good to me. I'm going to save the customization. So we'll call it ED, and then I can add it to a particular group called financial statements. So that's adding to the group, but I can also share it with all. And this would be for really company admins and any user in QBO in the manage user list that's set to all and not just customer or vendor. Okay. They would then, when they go into their My Custom Reports, they will see it on the list and who created it. See, so like this one created, like Valerie's created these. I'm not in as Valerie though, but I'm a company admin in the file, so I can see them. So that's a cool thing too. And I mean, desktop, you're memorizing reports for your clients, and that's cool. And I believe those are supported when you send the accountant's copy file back and stuff. But here's my memorized report list. But like Denise can create a bunch of reports for me, and when she saves the customization, she can share it with the all or a specific user, so that I can then when I go in and I'm not really good at customizing reports, I can just then, oh, cool. So Denise created these for me, and these are the ones I'm going to run. Like this will be my main report page I'd come to, because there's only 5 or 6 reports that she really wants me focused on a daily basis. You know what I mean? And she might even add them to my icon bar in Chrome or show me how to do that. So I'm one click away. So I like that piece as well. I think in desktop, again, you're in different versions of the same file, right, in desktop. So though I can create a bunch of memorized reports for them, you know, it's just not as collaborative with, whereas Denise can come in anytime from her QBOA into my file and just correct something, and let alone reports or things like that. All reports, I did want to mention, we did just add the balance sheet detail report. All reports, let me look in accountant reports. Where are you? Well, again, so some of this stuff is not in all clusters. That's probably what I'm noticing. I don't see it. Do you guys see the balance sheet detail? I don't see it here. To me, I mean, it's a, let me go back to Planet Pause. Some of these features I'm showing you, they'll be in all clusters eventually, but they're in most. But if your client doesn't see bundles, don't worry. They'll see them there very, very shortly. If your client doesn't have categories, that's probably because they converted from desktop, and we're rolling it in slowly to those that might have converted from desktop. But in reports, just wanted to show we have a balance sheet detail now. In my mind, this is really a GL for balance sheet accounts, right? Some people like this, some people it might not matter, but I wanted to make sure you knew that that's in there. And what it proves to me is we're at 7 million in AP. What? Okay, so clearly even I know something's wrong here, so I'll deal with that later. Hopefully you guys don't have any clients that do that. All right, so what I'm trying to prove to you is that we're adding more reports to parity with desktop reporting. Like we've added the open invoice report, balance sheet detail. We've added a bunch of like already canned P&L type reports, like percent of total income, year-to-date comparison. I mean, I can create these from just the P&L, but we're trying to give you some reports that might be canned in desktop here, and you're going to see more of that. I mean, that's a main focus is parity with desktop reporting. Even when you're customizing, as you might have noticed, I don't think I clicked this, but we call filter, whereas in classic reports, you might know it as lists, which is confusing. You're like, well, where do I go to filter a report? And it's really you click on lists, which just doesn't make any sense if you're a desktop user. But filter does, right? So you're going to see more parity even down to lingo, which I think will be helpful. And in tandem, if you're using that Windows app that I showed you, you know, that is really going to, the workflow will be more akin to what you're used to in desktop. Though at the end of the day, my contention is that I love Chrome for this stuff, and anybody can get used to a left-hand panel, a plus sign, and a gear icon. Anybody. All right, 2 minutes left. I don't see anything in chat, but I wanted to mention document attached. That's important. It's always been at the transaction level of QBO. So on this sales receipt, I could have attached something, right? You click here and go out and grab a picture or whatever, or a PDF or something. So, and it's always, there's no upper cap except per transaction. So you can have up to 25 megabytes per transaction for attached documents. But there's no cap outside of that, you know? I mean, we just give you guys however much on our server, you know, that you need. And there's even a, and this isn't new, but there's even a, you know, an attachment list, like desktop has a document center. You know, this is kind of the document center, right? It's not any better to filter or read this. I mean, it's just going to be a long list, just like desktop. So desktop doesn't really win there, except that they can attach the documents to a chart of accounts, and I believe employees. But really, where the more popular is customers and vendors, particularly vendors. So I can actually now, and this is new, so this bridges a gap, because I know document attach is just very important now. It's always been critical. Now it's just more, people are just doing it way more. I mean, we even have a phone app that can create an expense automatically in QBO that you can download with the document attached, and that phone app's free. But there's plenty of third-party apps that will do that as well. Anyway, I go into this subcontractor here, and I can, you know, attach a document. The workaround before was to do like a $0 check to just attach something to the transaction, because that's all that was supported. Whereas in desktop, you could attach things to lists and names as well as transactions. In QBO now, you can attach documents, Essentials and Plus, not Simple Start. But not only can you attach them to transactions, but you can attach documents to customers and vendors as well. I showed estimate to PO already. We talked about that. We can do QBOA another time because I know we're getting to the end, but conversion updates. Just so you guys know, as an accountant, when you're converting from Pro or you're using your accountant edition, hopefully. When you sign in as a team member of the Elliott Davis firm location QBOA, because I believe you guys are doing a QBOA per location, which is actually a best practice. You guys are already there. I'm a part of a QBOA. I'm actually the master admin, but even if I was a team member, either way. When you see the list of clients to, I'm going to skip inventory, but here's the FIFO thing, right? You can choose FIFO date. I'm going to skip it for now. The clients, you notice how they're broken down. It used to just be replace, which was bullet pointed, or create a new company file. And you're like, well, I don't want to replace something because what if I overwrite current client data, and how do I find the client? I mean, you could find it, but it's way better visibility now. And if you created a new company file, it created a QBO Plus sub, nine times out of 10, outside of QBOA. So then the sub you created inside of QBOA for this is now just a duplicate, right? So we've made it way easier. We took that ability out to create a new one because as an accountant and you're part of a QBOA, you're creating the QBO sub first in QBOA before you push the data from desktop. And now I can go down and look by date under my firm realm, the firm company name for QBOA, and then, let's pretend it's Elliott Davis -SC, right? And then I could just look for the file that I'm going to convert to. So that was a recent change. And by the way, with conversion, we've made other updates. In most cases, year-to-date payroll is now converting over. Memorized transactions convert. Multi-currency converts. Estimates have converted for a long time now. I'm just trying to think of things that would have been prohibited before. So we're working on that a lot so that there's not a lot of post-conversion cleanup, really. Okay? So that's a big thing. And those are most of the things. If we want to open up the floor for questions, because I know it's 2 minutes over from the hour as we talked about, and these are the things we had gone through. Hopefully this opened your eyes a bit on where we're trying to go with QBO, and you saw some stuff that you didn't know before, and certainly where we might have some advantage over desktop, particularly around automation, for sure. And the Windows app's always good to know. Denise, anything else that you guys wanted to cover or questions?
I have a question. This is Denise Woody. I have a question. You mentioned something that that is now converting the year-to-date payroll over to QBO. So is that if they were currently processing their payroll in QuickBooks Desktop and they convert to QBO, and they would then use the fully assisted payroll in QBO, it would convert that over? Is that what you were talking about?
No, the full service payroll really isn't the problem because the full service payroll into it, no matter where it's coming from, we're going to set that up for you. I mean, part of the full service payroll deal is that not only do we do the liabilities and forms, but we actually walk your client through the setup, including the year to date and anything that didn't come over. It's more about the do it yourself payroll.
Okay.
So if I go into this file, does this one have payroll? I got to see. I might not have it. But the do it yourself where the client's doing the payroll, you know, and if it converted in and I click get started with payroll, the biggest time suck, if you will, or the obstacle to creating it up where they'd lose all this time is when you had to re-enter all the year-to-date payments you made as well as liabilities as well as paychecks, because the desktop payroll module does not go into the QBO payroll module. They're totally separate. So what we've done over the last year is in 80% of the conversion cases right now, the year-to-date's coming over. So you go through like 10 screens and you're done, as opposed to spending 2 or 3 hours, you know, to the latest penny trying to get the tax payments and liabilities that you've paid up through, you know, 8/31. So that post-conversion work with payroll is way better for the do-it-yourself.
Okay, that's awesome, because we ran into this a couple times earlier that we had to manually put that stuff in, so that's great.
And you still might. Again, 20%, you're still seeing it, but that's why I still like the full-service payroll, and Amanda can talk to you more about that. For the extra $50 a month and whatever how many employees there are, honestly, for us to do the liabilities and the forms and yet do the whole setup, you know, it's really restrictive on what you can edit. They have to call support for stuff, you know, if the check's already been deposited, but you forgot to take out this or that, like some local tax. You know, they have to call support, but they'd have to do that anyway with the QBO do-it-yourself, because you can't make liability adjustments like you can with desktop payroll and QBO payroll, as you guys know. So, you know, you have to leverage support, but the fact that the setup is done by us through the first payroll run, I think that's advantageous. And most of my friends that have done a lot with QBOP, the do-it-yourself, are moving them all over to full service right now because it's just worth the extra money, which isn't a lot.
And you know, I would be part of the 20%, right?
Oh, totally. You're going to have to enter the year-to-date. I guarantee it, Denise. And you'll be calling me and going, hey, you told me it was not going to happen. And so,
exactly.
Right, that's why I qualify it to 80%, to be fair.